today we are going to be learning about section 5.1, and it is comparing and ordering fractions. Now I know we spent a lot on this subject in 6th grade, so I'm really hoping that a lot of this will just jog your memory, just kind of like the greatest common factor, least common multiple is what we're talking about right now. We're talking about comparing and ordering fractions. So I'm really hoping that this will just be a nice review, a nice easy lesson because we're talking about fractions and that sort of thing. So just try to jog your memory about what we talked about last year. So before we start, I wanted to do a couple of definitions. The first one is a multiple. A multiple is a number that is the product of that number and a non-zero whole number. So for example, if I said find multiples of 4, our multiples would be 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. Okay, so multiples get bigger. And when we were thinking greatest common factors, we got it smaller. We said what numbers multiply together to make that number. Now we're saying if we multiply this number by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, by 6, then we can find those are multiples. Okay, a common multiple just means it's a multiple, which again, these are multiples right here, that 2 or more numbers have in common. So if they both had 4, then 4 would be a common multiple. If they both had 16, then 16 would be a common multiple. And then we have least common multiple, which is also known as LCM. And that is the smallest common multiple. So let's say we did 4 and let's do 5. Okay, so I would do 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32. We'll stop there. Okay, then for 5, I would do 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Okay, so now I have to say which ones do they have in common. Well, they both have a 20, and that's really the only one that I see. Then we have to say, is that the smallest one that they have in common? It is, because 4, 8, 12, 16, 5 doesn't have any of those. So our LCM would be 20 in this case. Okay, so that would be how you would write it. LCM equals 20. Put a box around it. And we will do some more examples. Okay, so for our next example, we are going to do 3 and 4. So again, what I like to do is write them out like this. I can go 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. Yes. Yeah, okay. So then for 4, I can go 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28. Okay, so let's first find all the common multiples. They both have a 12. So that means it's a common multiple. Okay, so then I see they also both have a 24. So our definitions or our directions, there we go, says find the LCM. So to find our least common multiple, we have to say which is the smallest, which that's where our least comes in. Least means smallest. So which is our least common multiple? That would be 12. That is the smallest smallest multiple they have in common. So our LCM for this one would be 12. Okay, let's try another one. 4 and 6. Okay, so I can go 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32. Then for 6, I can go 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. Okay, so let's find which ones do they have in common. They both have a 12. Both have a 24. That looks like it for what we found. So now which one is the least common multiple? that would be my friend the 12. They both have a least common multiple of 12. 3 and 4 and 4 and 6. How interesting is that? Okay. That was one way to find the least common multiple, and that was the way that I told you last year. Find the least common multiple this way. Okay, because to me it's easy to lay it out, but the problem is that you might come up with something that is a little bit higher. Okay, so let's say the least common multiple, it says between 2 and 54. Okay, so that means you're going to have to write out 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, all the way up to 54. And that's a little ridiculous. So another way is to find prime factorization. Okay, so let's give this way a shot, shall we? Okay, so if I have 12 and 40, 12 I know is 2 and 6. Bring down my 2. 2 and 3. Okay, and 40, I'm going to do 4 and 10. 2 times 2. 5 times 2. Okay. So then what I need to do is write down which ones do they both have. We kind of did this for greatest common factors. Okay, so I'm looking, I have a 2 and a 2, so I'm going to write down 1, 2 times. They both have another 2, so I'm going to write down another 2. Okay, now they have nothing else in common, so this is where it gets kind of a little bit confusing, but hopefully not really. I'm just going to write down the rest of the numbers that are left. So I have a 3 here, times 3. I have a 5 there, times 5. And I have a 2 there, times 2. Okay, so just the ones that they have doubles of, I'm going to write 1 down, and then I just write down the rest of the numbers. Okay, so 2 times 2 is 4, times 3 times 5 is 15, times 2, 15 times 2 is 30, times 4, 4 times 30, 0, 120. Okay, so for this one, our least common multiple is 120, between 12 and 40. So again, I looked and I saw, okay, this one has 1, 2, this one has 1, 2. So then I wrote down 1, 2. Okay, this one has 1, 2. This one has 1, 2. So I write down 1, 2. Now there are no more that they both have in common, so then I just write down the rest of the numbers. I write down my 3 right here, my 5 right here, and my 2 right here. Okay? We'll do some more like this, so don't get too worried. This was just our first practice one. Okay, so now let's try 3 numbers for number 4. For number 4, we're going to try 12, 15, and 18. Okay, so let's do a prime factorization way again, just to get a little more practice. Okay, so 12 is 3 times 4. And if I bring down my 3, my 4 is, 2 times 2. So I've got 3 times 2 times 2. Now for 15, this one's pretty easy. I've got a 3 times 5. Okay, and for 18, I've got, let's do 3 times 6. And I bring down my 3, my 6 is 2 times 3. Okay, so now I have all my prime factorization done. All right, now I'm going to look and see that, first off, they all have a 3. So I'm going to cross off a 3 from everybody and write that down, times. Okay, and then I see that 12 has a 2 and 18 has a 2. So then I'm going to write down the 2. Now I'm looking to see if anything else is in common. I know that the 3 went to all 3 numbers, and so I would just write 1 down. Then I'm going to look to see if anybody else, if there are any 2 numbers that share a number, and that was the 2. Only 2 of them shared a 2, but I still am only going to write 1 down. So now I have to see, okay, I've got a 2, a 5, and a 3, so I'm just going to write those down. Another 2 right here, a 5 right there, and a 3 right there. Okay, so I've got 6 here, I've got 10 there, and times 3, 6 times 10 is 60 times 3. 60 times 3 is 180. So our least common multiple is 180. Okay, again, I'm just looking for if do 2 of them have the same number? Do 3 of them have the same number? If that's the case, then I'm just going to write down one of them because that's how we find our least common multiple. All right, let's try another one. All right, so now for number 5, we're going to start adding in variables. I have the number 6a squared, and I have the number 18a cubed. Okay, so I'm going to prime factorize them. So first I'm going to prime factorize my 6 and get 2 times 3. Then if I bring down my a, I'm going to get times a times a. Okay, and for 18, I'm going to bring down, let's do 3 times 6. So I'm going to have 3 and my 2 and my 3. Then I need to bring down my a cubed times 1, 2, 3 a's. Okay, now I have to go through and say, okay, which ones do they both have in common? They both have a 2. So I'm going to bring down 1, 2. They both have a 3, so I'm going to bring down 1, 3. They both have an a. I'm going to bring down an a. Both have an a. Bring down an a. Okay, so now I am left with a 3, so I have to bring times by 3. And I am left with an a, so I have to times by another a. Okay, so now I'm just going to multiply them all together. 3 times 2 is 6 times 3. 6 times 3 is 18. A cubed, because I have a times a times a. So I know that is a cubed. So 18a cubed, LCM equals 18a cubed, is our least common multiple. So now let's try a little bit of a trickier one. Okay, for number 6, we are going to do 12x and 15xy. Okay, so for 12, I've got 2 times 6. 6 I can break down to 2 times 3, and times x. If I bring down my x, because it's just one x, not x cubed or x squared or anything. For 15, I can do 3 times 5. That's already prime factorized. Then times x times y. Okay, so let's see what do they have in common. Well, they both have a 3, so I write down 1, 3. They both have an x, so I'm going to write down 1x. Now they don't have anything else in common, so I just write down the rest that I haven't crossed off yet. Times 2 times 2. Got those done. Times 5. Got that done. Times y. Okay, so I've got 5 times 2, which is 10. 2 times 3, which is 6. Times x times y. 10 times 6 is 60. Bring down my x, bring down my y. My LCM equals 60xy. So now really, you guys, this is just kind of a little bit like greatest common multiple. We just tested on that. And except for, we don't just find the ones that they have in common. First we find the ones they have in common. We write one down. Then we write all the leftovers down as well. So let's try another one. Okay, for number 7, it says 25 y squared and 15xy. Okay, so for 25, I can do 5 times 5 times y times y. For 15, I can do 3 times 5 times x times y. Okay, so they both have a 5, so I'm going to write down 1, 5. Okay, they both have a y, so I'm going to write down 1y. Then I don't see that they have anything else in common, so now I'm just going to go through and write down the leftovers. So I have a 5 left over. I have a 3 left over. I have a y left over and an x left over. Now let's multiply those together. 3 times 5 is 15 times 5 times y times x. 15 times 5, let's figure that one out. 25, 5, 6, 7, so that would be 75 y squared x. So our LCM equals 75 y squared x. Okay, so that is the last one. Again, remember, we can list multiples, but once we get to variables, listing is going to be very, very tricky. So we can't really do listing multiples with variables. And also, when our numbers get really big, it's going to be very hard for you to list multiples. You'll have to think a lot harder, whereas if we just prime factorize, find the ones that they have in common, write one of them down, and then write the rest of the leftovers, then we can just multiply together and be done with it. So there's 2 strategies for you to use there. Now we're going to talk about comparing fractions. Okay, so one method of comparing fractions is finding the common denominator. So let's say I ask you to compare 6/7 with 4/5. Okay, if I were to look at this, I would have a hard time deciding which one is bigger. Okay, so my goal that I need to do is find a common denominator. So I know that between 7 and 5, I can just, multiply by 5, multiply by 5, multiply by 7, multiply by 7, and now I have found my common denominator of 35. Because if I have a common denominator, then I just look at the numerator to see which one is bigger. That's going to be the bigger one. Okay, so 6 times 5 is 30, and 4 times 7 is 28. So which one's bigger, 30 or 28? Well, 30 is, so that one is bigger. 30 35ths or 6/7, however you want to write it. Okay, so that's our first method, is just finding a common denominator. So again, we can do that with number 2 that we're going to do right here. Number 2 wants us to compare 2/3 to 3/4. Okay, so let's do a common denominator of 12. To get 3 to 12, I have to multiply by 4, multiply by 4. To get 4 to 12, I have to multiply the numerator and denominator by 3. Okay, so now my new denominator is 12. Multiply my numerator, 2 times 4 is 8. Multiply my numerator, 3 times 3 is 9. What's bigger, 8 or 9? Well, 9 is. So this is how we would compare to 9/12. All right, let's do one more problem here. Number 3 says -3/4 and -7/10. Okay, so my common denominator I'm going to find for this one is 40. Multiply by 10, multiply by 10, multiply by 4, multiply by 4. So if I have 40, -3 times 10 is -30. -7 times 4 is -28 40ths. Okay, so now I have to figure out, if I'm thinking on a number line, here's my 0, and I'm counting down -10, -20, -30, which one would be bigger? Would -28 be bigger? Or would -30 be bigger? Remember, the bigger number when we're talking negatives is the one that's closest to 0. So in this case, -28 would be closer to 0. So therefore, -28 40ths or -7/10 is bigger than -3/4. Okay, so that's gets a little bit tricky when we're thinking negative numbers. But again, we've been working with them pretty much all year, so you should be getting used to, okay, it's kind of opposite. The smaller number is actually bigger. -1 is bigger than -20. Okay, so that's just the way you have to think about this one. Now that is all that I have for you today. So please let me know if you have any questions. Again, I'm going to start doing your help in the classroom. So I'm not going to put any extra problems from the homework on the videos. You'll just have to come in and we'll work through some of those together in class. So thank you for watching and I will see you later.